Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the Ferrari 360 Modena. In this video I'm going to share with you the painful reality of owning an old Italian exotic supercar. Financial pain really more than anything else. Yeah, so in this video I'm going to take you through all the money that I've had to spend in order to put this car into a reasonable and drivable condition. There were some things that I knew about, which I was prepared for, but there were some things that I was not prepared for, and there were some things that were made worse as a result of some of those things. It's a reality check for the ownership of one of these cars. Before we get on to all the negatives and the costs of ownership of a car like this, I do want to say something about the positives of owning a car like this. One of the things that I've always wanted to own is a Ferrari. The reason that is, it's difficult to really put into words. I think it's probably just the aura and the heritage of the badge. It just has something about it which sets it apart from other cars. It is so iconic, and just to be part of that kind of family of cars and that history, and to just be, you know, a small part of that heritage is something really special. This car does have that exotic look about it. It does have the brand cachet. You know, you're buying into that whole Ferrari heritage that stretches back decades into motor racing history and the history today in F1. It's all part of the package, I guess. And I know some of you may think that's a bit shallow, and yeah, you're probably right, but it's one of those things that as a kid you grow up with certain brands having a certain allure to them. Ferrari, Maserati, Lamborghini, Aston Martin, those real, McLaren of course, those real exotic brands are set apart from your more usual brands like Audi and Mercedes. They make fantastic cars, and they make fantastic high-end cars as well. There's no disputing that. But I think it's just the nature of the brand, its exclusivity, I guess. The iconic logo of the prancing horse is just, you just cannot kind of beat it really. It's a fairly modest introduction to the Ferrari brand. I don't think I'll ever really be able to aspire to anything much beyond this unless I win the lottery. It gives me a buzz every time I drive it, and just looking out over the bonnet, over those sensuous curves of the front wings, is just a very special experience which I can't really put into words. With all that said, and with all the benefits of owning a Ferrari, I'm going to be purely brutal in actually bringing everybody down to earth as to how much this car has actually cost me. It's going to be something that as an investment, I will need to keep for a long time. There's not going to be the same chopping and changing that I've had over this channel in the past. You know, I've had a lot of cars in that time, and I think that's partly to do with the fact that really what I should have bought at the start was a Ferrari, because that's what I wanted. Okay, so I hope you can see me all right. I bought the car in December of last year, and when I had the pre-purchase inspection done, there were quite a few things that I knew needed to be done. I knew that it needed a new air conditioning compressor, which had failed. I knew that it needed to have the gearbox heat exchanger replaced. I knew also that it was due for a timing belt service. I didn't have to do that straight away, but it was due, and I think just for my own peace of mind, I wanted to get that done. There was an initial inspection carried out. There was a few things trivial which I can deal with. I still have to deal with a few things like the leather on the dashboard is wrinkled, but that can be fixed easily. Some of the vents on the windscreen are still cracked and sticky and horrible. But some things in this car had been done already, such as getting the sticky buttons replaced, getting rid of all that stickiness on the buttons, which is a typical Ferrari problem. The one thing that hasn't been done is that it hasn't had the Legends stencil back onto it, so that's something I'll get done. Again, it's trivial. This is trivial stuff, really. Correcting the stickiness is important, but getting the printing back on, whatever. The first piece of work I had done was the annual service and the timing belt replacement. So that service consisted of timing belts, timing belt bearings and tensioners, and a fair bit of labour. Then there was a regular annual service with oil filter, pollen filter. That's got a K&N air filter which was washed and cleaned. Sump washers, oil, brake fluid, gearbox oil, discs and pads are all okay, tyres are okay. So the timing belt service and the annual service came to $5,451.56. So this is all in Australian dollars, so adjust accordingly for your local currency. British pounds is about half of that, and US dollars is just slightly under half of that right now. After we had the service, the general service and the timing belts done, we then looked at doing some of the things which I knew had to be done. AC compressor had to be done. The heat exchanger had to be replaced. I'd got the part myself from Eurospares. That was 687 British pounds. That's for the heat exchanger and the two sleeves. One goes on each end of the heat exchanger. Then there was the air conditioning compressor was sent away to be reconditioned, exchanging the heat exchanger, and that's quite a big deal because you have to take all the top of the engine off basically and all the air intakes. Then there was this noise when we were changing gears, which I thought was a Capristo exhaust, actually, kind of making it kind of a loose baffle, which was causing a noise in the engine and rattling on something. So the exhaust was realigned. I also put some new rear shocks in. They cost me about $3,000 used secondhand from the UK, and labour. Various other things were done in this service. The little reversing lever has a little tab on it that breaks frequently, stops that working properly. So all in all, with all the labour, that came to, I hope you're sitting down, $14,540. Now, US dollars, that would be about $7,000. Doesn't sound so bad in US dollars, so or British pounds, so we're kind of, it's not so painful in other currencies, but it's pretty unpleasant in Australian dollars. So anyway, and then of course, after I picked it up from that massive service, which I thought was going to fix everything, the first thing I noticed was, of course, the gearbox still making that noise. Wasn't the exhaust at all, it was still the gearbox. And there's still the issue with the differential, which seemed to have got worse since I'd been driving it. As you'll see from my video, which I'll link up here, I decided to take it to Ferrari North Shore to get it thoroughly looked at in terms of the transmission and differential, because not that I didn't think Andrea would do a great job, but I just really wanted to diagnose this properly. He probably thought that it was something that could be left a bit longer, but for me, I'm fussy. I need things to be right. I could probably have driven it like that for a while and it would have been fine, but every time I got into it, I just thought, oh, it's just not right. Anyway, so I'm fussy, so I spent more money than you probably need to. Anyway, so I took it to Ferrari North Shore. They diagnosed it immediately as being the differential had basically collapsed. It's a limited slip differential, and also the grinding noise when changing gears was wear on those synchro rings, which again, Andrea had hinted at. It had got significantly worse, and one of the problems that I had, and this is where I think I'd made this problem worse, is that the heat exchanger failing had caused the engine coolant to leak into the gearbox. Now, one of the commenters on my site, I'll link to his comment down below, or I'll put it on the screen here. One of the commenters correctly stated that once the heat exchanger starts to fail, you'll get water in the gearbox. I'd understood this to be the case, but also I'd thought that the oil pressure in the gearbox is a lot higher than the pressure of the cooling system, so it was more likely to be oil you're getting into the coolant rather than coolant into the gearbox oil. So I thought it would go one way and not the other. That's not the case. So when the heat exchanger starts to fail, you do get coolant in the gearbox and the differential. It contaminates that really quickly. That is probably what caused the differential to fail and exacerbated the synchro rings wearing. So to some extent, I caused this problem, because when I got the car, we knew it needed a heat exchanger. I probably should have got that done immediately and not driven it until that was done. So, you know, very important lesson learned there. If you ever see oil film in your coolant in a 360, stop driving it. Stop driving it, take it to a garage, take it to your service center as soon as possible, because any amount of water in the gearbox oil will cause, you know, catastrophic damage. With that said, we went to Ferrari North Shore. We had a stroke of luck in that they had access to a donor car which had suffered an engine fire. I'll link to the video up above here where I inspect the original gearbox which was taken out of this car, but also show you the engine that was taken out of the donor car, and you can see all the fire damage that it had sustained. So we were able to get a clutch and gearbox and differential unit out of a car which had done basically half the kilometers that mine had done. It had done about 25,000 kilometers instead of the nearly 50 that mine has done, and it had a new clutch only 4,000 or 5,000 kilometers ago. So I was getting pretty much a brand new clutch, much lower mileage differential and gearbox. I was able to get that gearbox, differential and clutch unit for just around the $14,000 mark. Much cheaper than taking the gearbox and differential apart and replacing all the worn parts. If that had been done, I think the parts alone were going to be over 20,000, plus all the labor, which, it just doesn't bear thinking about. Anyway, so we were able to just swap one for the other, and that made it a much better deal for me, which is fantastic. Basically, so yeah, that was it, plus labor, which is far less than it would have been. So labor was about $4,000. Add the two together plus GST and we get to $19,800 for that work. But I do have a car which has a much newer gearbox, clutch and diff. Should be, touch wood, you know, really solid for the lifetime of the car. Now, I mean, yeah, I'm hoping. It's been a very sobering experience having to spend the best part of 40,000 Australian dollars in 5 months on this car. That said, I absolutely love driving it. It's an occasion whenever I get into it. I look at the prancing horse on the steering wheel and I think, wow, this is just amazing. It is a beautiful looking car. As you know, I think it's one of the best looking Ferraris of any generation. It harks back to the curvaceous, sensual designs of the 60s. It also has some of the elements of the more modern cars, but hasn't gone to that, you know, high-tech kind of aggressiveness of the 458 and the later cars, which are more angular and kind of, they're less beautiful, I guess. They're more purposeful, but less kind of objectively beautiful. Whereas this, I think, is just a beautiful looking car from every angle, just gorgeous. What's the moral of the story? I guess the moral is that even with a pre-purchase inspection, these cars can be extremely expensive and temperamental. Budget for something in addition to the purchase price so that you can put stuff right and have it exactly how you want it. Anyway, that's just about it for this video. It's been an interesting start to my ownership experience of a Ferrari. I have to say I really do love it though, and it turns heads wherever it goes. It's crazy the amount of attention this car gets. It's all positive, it's all thumbs up, and you know, people taking pictures and video and stuff. It's been remarkable, really. So yeah, loving the ownership experience. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey. I hope we're going to have a lot more content on the Ferrari 360 Modena going forward. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. All the usual spiel about this, that, and this here. And look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.